5th, 1914, dramatic in Jim McCullough. My dad worked at the dry dock, building piling out into the water. While we was there, Grandma Stedham died, my mother's mother, and she had 3 children at home, and she asked Mom and Dad to take them and raise them, and he did. We left Pensacola and moved into Alabama to one of my dad's uncle's farm, Bullet Stedham. And Henry was born there in November 3rd, 1916. I remember Grandma McCauley coming to see her. She lived on Indian Grant land down in Porch between McCullough and Atmore. She drove a horse and buggy. And she left. She wanted me to go home with her, but my dad wouldn't let me. We never saw her alive again. She done most of the work around the house. Granddaddy never stayed home. He was all traveling with horse and buggy. And she done most of the farming and the work around there. Uncle Robert was still home, and Emma taught Indian school. She fell up the front, she had a stroke and fell up the back steps. Granddaddy happened to be home, and she kept on calling her dad, but by the time my dad got to her, she was gone. He often wondered what she wanted to tell him. We moved from there to Uncle Pat McCauley's, my dad's brother's home, other side of McCullough, on a farm. My uncle had a garage in McCullough, and he had a home there, so we farmed there, and Clarence was born over there. And so I remember Uncle Louis, Mama's brother, and Aunt Polly stayed with us a week, a month. And we stayed there, and then Aunt Emma went to college, and Uncle Robert went in the Navy, and Granddad wanted us to come and move into the old home where my dad was born. So we did. I started school there. We started school in Henry, and my Uncle Willie's still in school. And he quit a year after we did. And Uncle Louis and Aunt Polly come again and stayed with us about a year. And when they left, Uncle Willie went back with him to South Carolina, and Uncle Lamar went to Mobile, and Yetha still stayed with us. And we lived on a farm, and we had our own cows, and we had our own milk and butter, and we had pigs. We had a big garden, and Mama canned. She even canned meat a lot of times. I remember one year Dad had 3 big hogs, and some kind of disease got into them, the whole community, and he had to kill them and burn them. So, and my dad made syrup for the whole community, so we had syrup. And then my dad decided to plant cotton. He planted all his land in cotton, and then he rented land and planted in the cotton. We worked from Monday morning until Saturday night in the corn, cotton, picking cotton. And when we got about, for a week, we would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. My dad had built sides on the wagon, and we would pack the cotton into the wagon, and my dad would take it to Atmore, and he'd be gone all day. He'd come back with one time he had a stalk of bananas, then some pineapples, and one time he brought some ice cream home, and how we kept it, I don't know. But then he'd bring 100 pounds of sugar, and about 5 gallons for about 100 pounds of flour, and we had our own meal, and we'd get the lard, and we butchered the hogs, and we had a big smokehouse, and they had hams and sausage in the smokehouse. Got sweet potatoes. My dad would dig the sweet potatoes, and he'd bed them in a long bed with, he'd put dirt over them, and then straw, and then dirt over top of that, and then he'd put something down in the middle of that to keep the rain out of them. I can see Mom yet going out with a big dishpan, filling a big dishpan of sweet potatoes to bake. We had them all the time. And one time my granddad come to us, and his mother was still living with one of Granddaddy's sisters, and they wasn't taking care of her like they should. And he asked Mom and Dad, could they move in a house with her, and he did. And she was in the bed all the time. She had broke her hips. She married Macaulay, and he went to war and never returned. And then she married Eddings, and when she broke her hip, he left home. They didn't know what would come of it. She stayed in bed all the time with that broke hip. She moved in with us, and she had one room, and I ain't taking care of her all the time. She helped her up and down. She wouldn't wear gowns. She had long dresses made to sleep in them. She had one black bonnet and a black dress she never wore. She wanted to be buried in them. Well, long after that, my granddad died, and I'm bringing him in to where she could see him in the bed. And she said, why couldn't it have been her instead of Fred? Grandma didn't live too long after that. She died. And Polly was born there. Polly was the first one we had a doctor with. She had Dr. Peavy from Atmore. And Green was born, Polly and Green was born there. And my dad had a midwife, the rest of us, and after the baby was born, he'd taken care of Mama and the baby. He bathed us, dressed us, feed us, whatever we needed, he did. He'd taken care of it himself. Mama had an aunt lived in Bruton, and she ran a clothing store. Twice a year, she would send big boxes of clothes to us. Mama would make over what we couldn't wear, and the paints and stuff, she would tear them and make crook tops. And then she'd put old quilts or a blanket between that, and she'd tack it, and that's where made quilts out of them. One time we had the house we lived in was had a long hall and steps in the back, and 4 big rooms on each side. And one side of the house had double fireplaces, double chimneys. But one Sunday afternoon we were sitting on the porch, and Daddy had just bought me a little rocker, and we had a dog to go mad, and we had our table and chairs out in the hallway. Dad picked up, we got us in the room, and he picked up the little rocker and put one of the chairs between us. And when he got changed, he hit the dog and knocked him clear out in the back, but he broke my rocker. So the dog got away and went down through the Indian settlement. We lived close to that. And that night he come back and went over to the house. And me and Aunt Ethel had went to church. We walked to church. We were close by. And we heard a gun go off in the church. We knew what had happened. The dog got back into the house, and my dad had killed him. My mother had a sick spell while we were there, and the doctor said it was pellagra. She lost her mind for a whole month. My dad had to force her to eat, and I had to almost try in the bed to keep her in the bed. And they had word with her, neighbors that helped out. Finally, Dad said he couldn't see nothing else but sent her off. And he was fixing to go to Atmore to get the papers made up. And my granddad saw an advertisement in a paper, and we sent for it, and they had to hold her for the first dose. After that, she took it, and about 2 or 3 weeks she was all right. Her mind was all right, but she was never well after that. We had to wash my hands, we had rub boards, and Dad had a big pot. We rolled our clothes in it, hung on the fence, and we had the irons. We used oak wood to heat and cook with, and they had to use the old irons in front of the fire to iron. Ain't nothing but iron all day to get the thing ready, to get the clothes ready for, especially for the boys to wear. When Uncle Willie, when Uncle Lamar went to Mobile to find a job, and then Uncle Willie went home with Aunt Pilot and Uncle Louis, South Carolina. 1920, my dad, in the 1920s, my dad decided to move to Baldwin County. We had, Dad had a sister living in Loxley, and she married a Dunk Fields, and they had run a dairy, and they had a separator to separate the milk from the cream, and they'd taken the milk and mostly fed it to the animal, but they sold the cream. And we kids stayed there, except Henry. Him and Dad drove the horse, mules and wagon, and moved us down to Baldwin County. But Henry stayed there some too, and they had the separator, and I remember Henry telling Dad that Uncle Dunk had a cow. You twist his tail and the milk come out the horns. So when we moved down to Baldwin County, my dad went into dairy business, milk by hand, and we had to separate the milk. We started to school. We riding the school bus there. Guy Doe drove the school bus, and Dad knew him when he was a young boy at Atmore. And that's where I met Ida Andersen. And when the first ones come to see us after we moved to Baldwin County was Sadie McCurdy and the two Dobson brothers, Walter and Olive. And we got acquainted with them in the school buses and that, and they'd have little parties on Saturday night. We'd go on candy, and then we'd go to movies, drive in, and I remember the first time Alfred asked me to go with him to Ida and Henry was going together, and Alfred asked me to go with him to some of their school play, and so we started going together, and Henry and Ida went with us for a long time, and we'd go fishing, and we'd go down there and turtle hunting, and we'd go to different things, just ride around most of the time. My dad fished a lot, different ones from McCullough. Around up there would come down, and we'd go down to the Gulf. We went to Miller Landings a lot. We'd stay all night. My dad would catch the fish and cook them out there, and he'd make coffee in a coffee can, and we'd spend the night down there fishing. Uncle Bud and all was come. After school, we'd come in, we picked velvet beans to grind for the feed for the cows, and we'd cut the corn would get dry, we'd take the tops out of that and take it into the animals to feed. We had picked them, and then Dad planted potatoes. A guy would come through wanting to plant iced potatoes to make chips out of, contract potatoes, so Dad planted iced potatoes, and we had them to put. And then Ethel had met Charlie Barfield. They started going together. So we've been going together about 5 years, Alpha and myself. And then in November, he started building the house, him and Raymond and some of the neighbors. And so he told Mama didn't want me and Ethel to marry in the same year. So she told Alpha said after Charlie, they better get married before we would get married in February. So they married in December, and still stayed with Mom and Dad. And I married in Alfred in February of 1935, 28. We went to Pensacola, and Raymond went with us, and I stayed downtown, and they went to get their marriage license, and and they wouldn't let us have him. So they come back and got me, and I was closer to 21 than I was 20. So we went out to Cantonment, Florida, and Reverend Bowman married us. And we started a church. Two ladies from Silver Hill came over and started a church. My dad had been going to Summerdale, to the Baptist church, and we had church under the cedar trees for a while, and then we moved on up to Stipman's across from where the church is now, and had it in the yard, and then we started having it at homes. And finally, Merle McCurdy gave us land to build the church. So my dad, Lasters, Ards, Raymond, and Powers, they all went to the woods, and my dad taking the mules and pulled the lumber, or pulled the trees out of the woods, and had them sawed, and then they started a church. And it was just almost built the year we decided to get married, and they wanted us married in church, but I couldn't talk Alfred into it. So we married, and Joyce was born in December the 4th, 1935. And then I had Dr. Hales was her doctor, and then Annie Claus stayed with her. That was Alpha's sister for 3 weeks. She lived in Summerdale. She was a widow. And then Jimmy was born in March 20th, where is he born? 35, 37. And Annie stayed with me again for about 3 or 4 weeks. And my folks then, they were still living there. Then my folks decided they were going to move to Texas. So they left us and went to Texas. And while they were in Texas, I had Steve, and Annie had gone to Florida, and she had asked Charlie if Charlie needed to move in her house. So I stayed with them till September to February. I lost him. So when he was born, 3 weeks old, I went home with their kids. And that Christmas, my dad and Mom come from Texas to visit, the first time they ever stayed with us. And he went to bed that night. My dad woke up about midnight. All that been going on. We didn't know what was wrong. They got the doctor to him, and the doctor couldn't quieten him. So the next day, they carried him to Mobile, and they operated on him, and he had ulcer. Had the intestine that went into the maw of the stomach had recovered away. He stayed there. They operated on him, and they lay there for 12 days, and his stomach burst open again, and they had to operate again. They decided to come, when Dad decided to come home, he wanted to come to our house, but me and the kids all had the flu. So they went and lived with Uncle Bud, and they had moved, after Raymond and Mary, they had moved and built a little house across from Raymond and Maddie. And Raymond had bought the house next door to us. A lady lost her husband, and she decided to go back north. So they moved in Raymond's house for a while, and then Raymond decided to move back, and they built a little house right across from us. Mom and Dad did. And then they decided to move to Mobile. And they moved up to Mobile, and they run a boarding house over there. And Joyce, when she started to school in Foley, she started working for the telephone company. And then she started working in a little school store, and then her and another girl had a trailer that lived in that. And she worked back, and she was homeless on weekends. And then Jim and Steve, they stayed a lot in Mobile with my folks during the summer. And then when Jim decided to go in the Air Force, And Joyce married in August, and then he went into the Air Force, made a career of it. Steve went in the Army. He didn't stay about 6 years. He got out. And Alfred decided after the kids left, he turned the farm over to Hobson Dubois was releasing the farm, and him and Raymond started working at the Civil Social in Robbinsdale. He worked there 8 years, and he decided the year before he was 65, he decided to retire. And he had been out a year when he got sick, and they found out he had leukemia. He lived for months. At the time, Steve was living in Fairhope, and Jim was stationed at Eglin. And after he died, Steve and Eunice stayed a week with me, and then he moved. Then he left Mobile and went to Morgan City, Louisiana, and Jim and Daddy stayed with us a week. Then I decided they wouldn't let me stay by myself. I'd taken some kind of ear disturbance, and the doctor said I couldn't stay by myself, so I moved in the house with Joyce for a while. And then I decided to sell them some land and bought me a car, and I paid cash for the trailer, and I made payments on the car. I went to work at the Dairy Queen. I worked there for 12 years. And each month I'd make a payment on the car, and what I got 2 checks for each year from the farm, and I put that on there till I got it paid for. Then when Beatrice sold it, and I had surgery for gallbladders, I didn't go back because I didn't like the people that bought it. And I went to work at the Plaza Cafe for Bud Andersen. I worked there for about 3 years, and I was 65, and the doctor said I had a lot of trouble with my legs, and he said I had to get off my feet. So I retired at 65 and started drawing Social Security. I still lived in the trailer close to Joyce. I had my own car, and I'd go when I wanted to, and I go to church, and then I go to Bible school once a week during the winter. In the summer, I generally visit Mobiles and my brothers and sisters, and I go when I get ready, and then I have 7 grandchildren, and soon have 14 great-grandchildren. And most of them is around him, and I get to see them often. And they're very precious to me, and I love them very much.
What year were you born?
Huh?
What year were you born?
June the 5th, 1914.
And where were you born?
Pensacola.
Was it a hospital?
And the church and my kids gave me a big birthday party, and then this past June the 5th, and I was 80 years old. No, I was born upstairs in an apartment in Pensacola. No doctor.